So for the first presenter, I'm just going to give a short introduction. Following the Senate's passage of the tax bill, a direct threat to the livelihoods of working people and families, a point has been added to the agenda of this webinar to discuss the implications of this bill and how to fight back. So first we will hear from Brian Becker, of the National Director of the Anti-Coalition and one of the conveners of the People's Congress of Resistance. So now I'll give the floor to Brian.
Thank you, Carla. Can I be heard properly? Is the audio sound okay? Okay, fine. So good afternoon, everyone. It was so good that the People's Congress of Resistance was able to issue that infographic. I hope people are sharing it. The title of it is Tax Plan is a Looting Operation for the 1%. And certainly it is. The bill is not yet law. There are different versions. One is in the Senate, hastily put together, mainly not read by even the US senators. It's a dense document, largely written by lobbyists on behalf of banks and corporations and very fabulously rich people. There will be a different version in the House. They have to reconcile the two versions in what's called conference. That's when the House and the Senate come together if there's different versions of a bill. Then it goes back and has to be approved by both houses and then signed by the president in order to become law. Trump is trying to ram this through by Christmas, which would be December 25th, or a couple days before when Congress goes on break. The last time there was a major tax code overhaul was 1986. There was 1 year of debate and discussion within different subcommittees of Congress and committees, and there was a great deal of public discussion about the tax bill before it became law. This is all being rushed through in about 3 weeks. It's completely done in secret. There's no transparency whatsoever. As approved, if the Senate bill is such that if your family or if you as an individual make $13.8 million a year, and I'm quite sure that none of us on this call do, you will get an average $800,000 a year tax break. If you are someone making an income of, if you're in the top 1%, if you're making $700,000 a year, and I'm quite sure no one on this call is doing that either, you'll have savings of $150,000 per year. If you're a married couple with one child earning $48,700 a year, your tax break next year will be $180. And if you're like very many people in this country, a married couple with one child earning about $25,000 a year, you will have a 0% tax break. So obviously the bill is a gargantuan giveaway to the already rich, to the corporations. Corporate tax rate will be cut in half. It will also add to the budget deficit by $1.4 trillion over the next 10 years. And this by a Republican-dominated Congress, which has always been arguing against even the most minimum increases in any social programs that help poor and working people, on the basis that any addition to the national debt or deficit would be an intolerable sort of burden that would be paid for by future generations, blah, blah, blah. And so they've always used the argument that they can't increase the government deficit if the government spending is anything that actually helps people. But when it comes to giving huge tax breaks to the already very, very rich, they're willing to adopt a $1.4 trillion deficit. But this deficit also has a purpose, which is then to justify what we'll see coming right after the new year and after this bill is passed, should it pass, which will be the argument made by the Republican leadership that the deficit now is so grave that there has to be drastic cuts in food stamps, in tuition aid, in student aid, in healthcare subsidies, in healthcare for the elderly, or what's called Medicare. There will be a planned assault against Social Security, all in the name of overcoming the deficit that they themselves have greatly contributed to by giving $1.4 trillion in additional tax breaks. Well, actually, it'll be much greater than that to the already rich. So during this entire time, when this major war that's being waged by the Republican Party against the working class and poor has been undertaken, the Democrats in Congress, who are, yes, a minority, but still have substantial clout, they could easily summon millions of people to come to Washington, D.C., and millions of people would heed the call. They've done nothing except to attack the Trump administration again and perpetually for being a stooge of Russia. And they have used the FBI and the Mueller investigation as the way to attack Trump rather than defending working class and poor people and the elderly. At the same time, the new Senate version of the bill ends a key part of the Affordable Care Act, which is the individual mandate. Not that we're for the Affordable Care Act, but by eliminating the individual mandate, it will lead to a restructuring of the Affordable Care Act and the loss of probably 13 million people who are currently enrolled with health insurance. So I think we can see after 1 year of Trump what Trump is really all about. The main goal of the Trump administration is to loot, plunder, and pillage the national treasury and the way the government is organized so as to carry out a major redistribution of wealth to the already rich, to the corporations, and to the banks. And Trump's calculation is that if he succeeds in doing what seemed impossible before, this kind of major redistribution of wealth and a full-scale, full-throated frontal attack against Medicare, Social Security, and other very important and very valuable social programs in an effort to try to privatize them and make them a tool for additional profits for the banks. If he could succeed in doing that and overcome resistance to that, then the Wall Street banks and corporations who have been skeptical about Trump as a leader, they would turn around and embrace his program. In other words, they, he feels, are possibly his real constituents, along with, at the base, a sector of the population that's either alienated or embraces his xenophobic, white supremacist, misogynist views. So we now have an opportunity 1 year in to really understand that the Trump administration and the Republicans in Congress, and I would say either by the silence or the complicity of the Democrats, that this administration and Congress are nothing other than a tool to launch class war against the working class and poor. And the unions have been generally silent. There hasn't been a great deal of fight back from the labor movement. The social movements that have been progressive because of their ties to the Democratic Party are in many ways passive right now, functioning as spectators, watching the congressional hearings that focus mainly against Trump's connection to so-called Russia or Russia collusion, which I believe there's been no shred of evidence yet proving that. And so we're in a situation of social crisis. And I think People's Congress of Resistance activists around the country, and we as a national network, need to be coming together and doing as much as we can do in the next month, producing literature, producing information, holding educationals, organizing with people in our communities, either demonstrations or rallies or speak-outs to make the point that this Congress, the Republican-led Congress, but a Congress where the Democrats are basically irrelevant because of the way they've decided to function, is about to not only give this huge tax giveaway, this trillions of dollars to the rich, but set the stage for a massive attack against all the social programs and reforms that were won starting in the 1930s. In other words, we're entering an era of pronounced class war, but right now that class war has been initiated by the upper class, the ruling class, the capitalist class. And we have to talk very seriously about how we, especially when you look at our manifesto and how the manifesto outlines what our Congress stands for and what it needs and how it's financed, I think it provides an excellent counterpoint that we should try to take into action and activity over the course of the next 4 weeks. We will be producing more memes, more literature, more resources, more talking points, so that we can take this seemingly arcane, abstract subject, the national budget, which seems so sort of outside the realm of most people's lives, and bring it down to earth to let people know how high the stakes actually are. So that's my report.